So, BIP of Bizarre Interest Productions, and here's a question. Is there a trend of characters who are Chinese coded getting neglected? I don't know what I'm going to name this. Probably if you're a Chinese coded girl and your writers hate you, clap your hands, or Chinese coded and neglect the girls. But I didn't want to talk about it because, well, it's not a trend. There are a few times where my brain went 2 + 2 is 4, but what was the subject connecting all of them together? Well, for Asian American Heritage Month, I already talked about Wang Huzhong from Beyblade 2 and how I wish we got to learn a little bit more about Mei Mei, so how about we spin like a Beyblade into other target points of discussion? If you made it this far into the video, type tenten deserves better, and let's get started. Let's start this off with Lu Xiaotang from Sakamoto Days. So I accidentally dropped Sakamoto Days anime. Don't worry about the reason why. I actually liked it. The whole group dynamic with Sakamoto, Shin, and Lu was pretty fun. But I remember people complaining about the anime's marketing wasn't focusing on her before it came out. But then it turned out manga fans were hoping the anime wouldn't neglect Lu's character. To make a long story short, from what I could research, after the Death Row's Prisons arc, which I believe is what Sakamoto Season 1 ended on, with Season 2 going to follow up on the rest of it, Lu kind of ended up not doing much for the story or much in the story afterwards. And that's kind of questionable given that I think Season 1 ended on the first half of that arc, and yeah, since it's going to explore the second half. When people start to notice that Lu's not getting in on the adventures that much, I know some of the fans who got into the anime aren't going to be happy with that. And it's not like she wasn't doing terrible or horrible. Like Sakamoto, Shin, her, and Heisuke seem to have a lot of balanced screen time when they went to rescue Lu and the researchers who worked with Shin. So it's possible the author could have either gotten bored with her character. I know some people have claimed and partially joked that the series needed someone to watch over Sakamoto's wife and daughter, which, hey, is valid while Shin and Sakamoto go on these adventures. But I've also seen speculation on the writer just not having that many places to explore her character. Which is a shame because for a shonen, her parents were involved in a triad family, and I don't need to explain how mafia connections, ties, and rivalries could work really well for a story about assassins. Plus, like, her Drunken Fist style is actually pretty cool. It's definitely possible that it could have evolved, you know, with her either not being relying on drunk to improve it or altering her moves based on the type of alcohol that she drinks. But that also led to comparison to Tenten from Naruto and Boruto, because Tenten's in this weird case where half of Naruto fans will clown on her for really stupid reasons. Like, there are genuine people who think she's gaining level just because she lost a fight where she had a bad matchup. Then the other half point out she was underused given the fact that she was a weapon master with an insane arsenal, and given that there are powerful opponents that use weapons she didn't get the chance to fight or could have fought and surpassed or had an answer to, and the fact that summoning jutsu and the connections between space-time ninjutsu ultimately could have made her more broken would have helped if she had more focus. To be fair, while people claim that Shippuden underutilized the Leaf 11 and all of Naruto's supporting cast, despite the fact that there are many members of Naruto's supporting cast who had plenty of moments to shine in Shippuden, I will say for Tenten in particular, there are minor changes you can make where she still has a big role to play despite her status. For example, during the Leaf invasion, given Lee and Neji were injured, I don't think it would be too weird to have Guy have taught her how to dispel genjutsu, since he knows of ways to counter them like we saw in his fight with Itachi. You could have her go to Shikamaru, Naruto, and Sakura when they go to find Sasuke. Like, we know Temari and Sasuke's fight wasn't in the manga, so to explain why she didn't help Sasuke fight Gaara, Shino came to help stop Kankuro, so why not have Tenten take Temari on in a rematch by using weapons that can cancel her win, or do what Sasuke did by trapping her in flames, switching out for a substitute and using explosions and her giant weapons to separate her from her fan. She didn't do bad against Deidara, but going into the war while she beat Kakuzu's mask one of the fans, don't you guys think it would have been way more cooler and satisfying if she worked with Darui? You know, they could have figured out how to defeat the Gold and Silver Brothers together. I feel like a lot of people don't like the war before Naruto stepped in because most of the combatants outside of Kakashi versus Zabuza, Team 10 versus Asuma, and yes, ones where we knew characters for far longer, like Sai and Kankuro versus Sasori, Shin, and Deidara, and Gaara versus Rasa were not that appreciated. And I feel like if you had changed some of the matchups so that most of the Kohona 11 had their big moments to shine, alongside Chojuro and Kurotsuchi, but that's a topic for another day, the war's first half may have not had that negative reputation as it is, because, let's be honest, people just like to see the characters that they know more and that they like more do more cool things. Also, in Boruto, why is Tenten not in the scientific ninja tool department? I know Kishimoto wrote in chapter 700 her business isn't doing so well, but Naruto definitely should have recruited her into that program since they're developing weapons and items meant to help average shinobi and citizens. She should be there. It's a good fit for her. Then there's Chang, and outside of the fact J.K. Rowling really could have said she was mixed Korean and Chinese American, yeah, she ends up as Harry's first love interest that doesn't get used outside of her grief with Cedric, and the emotional stress after Goblet of Fire, her relationship with Harry not turning out well, the fact that several fanfic writers and fans don't like her or crap on her to pop up Ginny, on top of the fact that some people do appreciate her for being a non-white character that's not a stereotype. She's smart but not stereotypical nerdy and isn't ditzy either. But I don't really keep up with Harry Potter, so I'll let you guys in the comments dictate that conversation. Even Chun-Li got neglected in Street Fighter V. She really got a fight in the single mode because when you look at who are the protagonists of A Shadow Falls, it was basically a tie between Nash, Ryu, and Rashid. And while I think that story is salvageable if you tweak a couple of things and just explain a few things more in detail, for what was supposed to be Bison's final fight, it really should have been a gauntlet where she, Ryu, Nash, and Guile were all involved in his final defeats. And something, if you noticed, a lot of people in the Street Fighter community have pointed out, is that compared to Ryu and Ken, who both have Sakura and Sean, she's the only one who doesn't have a legacy fighter of her own. You know, a younger take on a character with new moves and abilities that captures the spirit of their character they're modeled after, what their own flair, that eventually grow to their own if the company decides to use the character more. I mean, she has Li Feng right now, but she's not playable. For now. Maybe eventually. Let's talk about the Very Odd Parents and Trixie Tang. Even though I prefer Tootie, was also kind of wasted as a love interest and flanderized despite having so much potential beyond the popular aloof girl. Though she's been riding off this episode's fame for multiple episodes, the boy who would be queen explored that she had that secret tomboy side of being a fan of comic books, as well as a lot of people just wanting to learn more about her from this episode, and what she got to do more in certain episodes. Unfortunately, alongside a few episodes that would show that she had probably some interest in Timmy, they never touched upon the subject again. I remember Butch Hartman saying that they ran out of stories to tell with most of the original characters by season 6 to 8, which I feel is a big utter waste because I've always said that it felt like the Very Odd Parents needed new blood in the writing room, or at least people who Butch's ideas could bounce off and create new storylines. A lot of people say that Trixie just felt like a cliche and that no one really noticed she was Asian or Chinese, but let's be real, Tang is more of a Chinese last name. And while I wouldn't call her an airhead, that complexity would have made more her interesting if she and Timmy actually got to flesh out their dynamic and relationship, or at least start out as friends. Why weren't some of these women written as ideally as they could have? Well, in Sakamoto Days, we don't know, but looking at Naruto, Very Odd Parents, Potter, and we could just assume it's just because that their writers didn't have that much planned for them in general. I mean, Cho is a minor character to the main trio and doesn't have the issues or ties to the world like the others. Kishimoto allegedly said that Tenten wasn't meant to be a prominent character, but he liked her design, so she gets used for crowd filling a lot. And Butch Hartman admitted he ran out of stories to tell with the original cast he made after a certain point. And honestly, this has been something going on for a while when it comes to just Asia and, well, none of these series are from Hollywood, just how Asian people are presented in Hollywood, especially Asian women of Chinese descent. So here we enter Anna May Wong. Anna May Wong is considered the first Chinese-American movie star. Born to second-generation Chinese-American parents in Los Angeles, she worked in several movies as an extra before getting a big role in The Thief of Baghdad. However, Hollywood cast Anna May in supporting roles playing stereotypical Chinese characters. It was partially out of worry featuring an Asian-American actress as a female lead, but because the Hays Codes was this stupid prototype of the rating system to America's cinema for decades, and the fact that one of the rules back then were that you could not include miscegenation, aka interracial relationships, or if you don't know what interracial relationships, it means relationships between two people of two different races. So studios used that to hire non-white actors for employments, and when Anna May Wong tried to get a role in The Good Earth, the Hays Code prevented her from getting cast as the wife of the white Paul Mooney, even though Paul was a white guy playing a Chinese character. She turned on the role and moved to Europe and Asia to play these types of characters that she wanted to play instead of just stereotypes, though she did come to America to work on some roles, one even made for her like Daughter of Shanghai, but her health had worsened in later years before she died of a heart attack, unfortunately. So, in the comments, put RIP Anna May Wong in respects if you made it this far into the video. But to conclude, I think my point is that while this isn't a trend, some of these characters just don't get fleshed out because the author basically made a character with Chinese elements, gave them one or two personality traits or things to do, and just don't flesh them out beyond that. Which is a shame because every character I talked about has some fans in some way or regard, and I think most people try to argue or will argue that they could have had more focus and development in areas if the writers wanted to try. So in the comments, you tell me if the characters I mentioned, how do you think they could have been used in the story more? How would you wanted them to be used in the story mode? And what do you think the authors could have done with them more? But yeah, that's all for this one. Anyway, let me know what you think, and BIP for Bizarre Interest Productions, signing off.